Today we're going to be covering 500 years of Indian fashion, and I have fashion and textile historian here, Maayankraj, who is going to share about how Indian fashion progressed over the past 500 years, just how it's evolved, and so that we can all learn about the beautiful cultural diversity and just intricate history of Indian fashion.
Thank you for that, Vasi. My name is Maayankraj Singh. I'm a costume and textile historian because I've studied this particular topic quite extensively. I also recorded the oral traditions pertaining to costumes and textiles back in 2012, and it's still ongoing because we learn everything. We learn something new every day. I also am a couturier, and my brand is called Atelier Shikaarbagh. It's the only brand in India which is the same family which has been with us since the past 9 generations, has been the ones who have been embroidering these particular garments. It's an honor and a privilege to be invited by Vasi to speak about 500 years of Indian fashion, as this is a topic which is quite new and there's not too much information. So we'll try and do justice to this particular topic.
Yeah, exactly, because it really deserves to have light shown on it, and for more and more people to realize the realities of what it was like. And like you said, there's so little research online done about it. How would you say that Indian fashion looked during the 1400s? Just like a general overview of sort of what was going on.
So we start with what was happening pre-1400s in India. India has been known to be very liberal since the very beginning, and scantily dressed and wearing unstitched garment doesn't mean that you were not sophisticated. It is not a sophisticated culture, which was an outlook which West developed over a period of time. If you see these are sculptures depicting real people who lived during their times. We're talking about roughly around the 5th century BC or the 6th century BC. You see these beautiful women and dancers depicted wearing tons of jewelry and just a loincloth, or probably sort of a scarf around their shoulders. Wearing unstitched garments was also considered to be had very religious connotations, as the energy flow from the earth is supposed to travel through all around your body, go and meet the earth again. So this is one sentiment which was there, wearing unstitched garments. An unstitched garment was something which has been worn throughout all the time, till the very recent times as well. So whenever we sit in a particular puja, even in the day and age of today, we're supposed to be wearing a dhoti and a shawl over it. And of course, shawls are very popular in India. Sari is an unstitched garment. So yes, we are a culture where unstitched garments have been the primary part of the traditional garments.
Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Ritual for sponsoring this video. Did you know that the top 5 best-selling gut supplements from the top 5 brands do not include a postbiotic? Ritual's expanding their products and just recently launched Synbiotic Plus, which is a daily 3-in-1 prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplement designed to support gut, digestive, and immune health. Each capsule is designed with delayed release technology to help reach your colon and not your stomach, and each biotic has a clinical study matched to the dose, because we love science on this channel. I've really enjoyed taking Ritual Synbiotic Plus, as I'm a massive fan of probiotic supplements actually, so having this 3-in-1 alternative that's way more than just a probiotic has been a big game changer for me. The science behind gut health is also just incredibly fascinating, and I highly recommend going down that rabbit hole if you like science. Ritual Synbiotic Plus is science-backed and full of research. I found them to be extremely easy to take as well, as it's just one daily capsule essenced with mint for simple, streamlined gut support. And might I say that the capsules are just aesthetically so beautiful, like little pieces of art. Best of all, they do not need to be refrigerated, and Synbiotic Plus boasts a clean formula that's vegan friendly and formulated without GMOs, major allergens, artificial colors, etc. Synbiotic Plus is also made traceable, showing you every labeled ingredient, supplier, and key studies that go into their vegan friendly products. I really value transparency a lot, and transparency is at the core of everything that Ritual does, from the way that the nutrients are sourced to the environmental impact of the materials used to ship thousands of orders. Subscriptions are delivered to your door monthly with free shipping, so you'll never have to worry about forgetting to order. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate and not hide your insides, and that's why Ritual is offering you all 20% off your first month using my code VBirchwood20. That's 20% off during your first month by going to ritual.com/VBirchwood20 and using code VBirchwood20. Thank you again to Ritual for sponsoring this video. Now back to 500 years years of Indian fashion.
Unstitched garments and being wearing more jewelry and less of garments was very popular during till the 11th century AD. But it was also the time when a lot of invaders started coming to India from Central Asia. And that was a time when it amalgamated all of the Indian culture, Indian traditions, and the Central Asian influence started meeting, and they developed a style of garment, what was being very popular in the 1400s. So I'll share a few slides with you about what was happening in the 1400s.
It's great that you shared just before what happened as well, because then we kind of get an understanding of how it changed very drastically.
Wearing unstitched garment has been a part of Indian culture till the very recent time, till the 18th century, when the British ideas of morality were introduced into the Indian mainstream. A lot of women down in southern India, even central India, they used to go and do their stuff bare-chested. It's only the very urban sort of societies where people are forced to confine themselves in a blouse and a petticoat before you drape on a sari. And I think that there are around 3,000 recorded ways of tying a sari. Only a handful of them actually make use of a blouse. I've written it down in my thesis words. While nudity or a minimal use of clothing is often associated with primitive or underdeveloped cultures, the unstitched garment was worn in a sophisticated urban environment and remained the preferred form of aristocratic dress throughout India's history. The unstitched garment is no less sophisticated because it is not sewn. Wrapped or draped garments are as structured by their definitive drapes as those that are stitched and follow conventional proportions dictated by socio-cultural norms. The role of clothing as portrayed in Indian art is not to hide or clothe the body, but to adorn it, like jewelry. This has sort of been like a motto behind clothing, that clothing never defined you. It was a form of adornment. It's sort of a very therapeutic sort of a process. In case you see, even in the very ancient texts, like the Rig Veda, the Ajur Veda, these are not religious texts. These are dictates on how you lead your life. Mm-hmm. So Hinduism, the religion which I follow, is governed by these dictats which were written during the 3rd century BC, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. But that generation, and it's only how you lead your life. It's not dictating that you should do this because the God, the Supreme Being has asked you this. No, not at all. It's just a duty to lead a rich life, enriched by all of, to wear a particular style of garment to feel happy, to wear a particular style of garment to be mourning someone. If you have a bad day, you wear a particular garment. So there are dictats on garments as well, and these texts. And I'll also share, it's called Natya Shastra. Natya Shastra means the Ved of theatre. It's just named Natya Shastra, but it's less to do with theatre. It's more like life. So life has been described as sort of a theatre, where you play these roles and these are the costumes which you wear. So this is what it is. The 1400s were very, like Renaissance was going on in Italy. The same way a Renaissance in the way of life in India was going on. Not exactly in the terms of art, because it was very tumultuous period in Indian history. A lot of invasive forces had come from Central Asia, especially from Afghanistan. This is also the time when the Mughal Empire is born in India. So they had a very distinctive way of wearing their garments. But they used to wear a woolen sort of a tunic and pants and riding boots, because they were a warrior-like clan. Their practices were completely different. They used to wear garments which were woven with silk. They used to wear garments which are woven with wool, and they made a lot of uses of these garments, which is a part of life in Afghanistan, like very heavy woolen garments, because the temperature is cold. The Mughals, headed by Babur, they come to India, and they come to a hot environment. India is hot. I mean, it's hot most of the times. Once you go a little northwards, it starts cooling down because you have the mountains naturally. But when they came into India, they saw the local populace being dressed in cottons. That is where the costume style sort of started amalgamating, and this is what we'll see in the 1500s, the 1600s, 1700s, where the styles are sort of constant. So now we've talked about the invaders. We'll talk about the local populace. These are religious Jain miniature paintings. which describe the way of life and what the people were wearing at that time. And in case you go through these paintings, so people are wearing richly embroidered saris, they're wearing blouses, and they're not going bare-chested, because now the idea of morality has started creeping up into the Indian history. When we go through these Jain paintings, you see a clear distinction between what was being worn earlier, where garments were used to adorn you, and now we come to a place where garments are used to cover yourself. People say that blouses were a British fashion. Not at all. Blouses have been in existence since the very beginning. And also, on the other hand, in these religious texts, you see people wearing the garments like the way they were wearing in the earlier times, not covering themselves up totally in yards of garments. So there are two schools of thought which is going parallel to each other, which is like one which is getting very conservative, and one which is adhering to the previous notions of their costumes. The Central Asian costume met the Indian costumes. 1500 and 1600 AD were completely like there's not too many changes in the way the costumes are being worn. It's sort of what men are wearing is completely, it goes on similar till the end of the 19th century. It's only start changing later. What the women were wearing goes on constantly the same. So all these garments are still being worn today. So when you go through all these miniature paintings, you see a complete style which is formed now, where the style which is formed now, taking in consideration some inspirations from the Central Asian costume, like the pants have been introduced into the Indian fashion. Bodice has been introduced into the Indian. So not a bodice, but a waistcoat has been introduced into the Indian fashion. Veils are becoming more profound. They're used to cover your head. The garments are fabric has been becoming very diaphanous, like you see, because the cotton weaving industry and the silk weaving industry in Banaras, which is one of the oldest cities to be inhabited, Varanasi. The Mughals, who have established their empire in the 1400s, now they've become sort of permanent. They are trying to amalgamate with the local populace, especially the Rajas and Maharajas of Rajasthan, the rulers in Odisha, the southern part of India as well, from Deccan to Madras to Kashmir, all of these. So the Mughal Empire is spreading slowly and steadily into all these areas. They have sort of combined all these regional styles and made a particular style which is called the traditional Indian costume from the 1500 and 1600, which you also see in movies like Jodha Akbar. Like there's an angrakha, then there's a patka, there are pants, and then you have your headgear. And with the women, it's like a skirt, where the circumference can go anywhere from 6 meters to 120 meters in a skirt.
Wow. That's incredible. The amount of sheer work going into the weaving of that skirt would be profound.
Yes, and there are a lot of experiments in the industry, in weaving industry especially. Mentioned in these Akbarnama and Babarnama, these are the names of the rulers, the Mughal rulers, that they have made a cloth so fine which can pass through a needle, the eye of the needle, or they made a fabric so fine, woven a muslin so fine, or woven a silk so fine, that even if you wear 7 layers of it, you still look naked. This is also the time when they have made fabrics like gadji satin. So it's a form of satin which is satin on the top and cotton at the back.
Oh, interesting.
Because in Islam, you're not supposed to wear silk. So they found a way to wear silk with the cotton. The weaving is such, the warp and weft is such that only the top layer is silk and the bottom layer is cotton.
So that way the silk doesn't actually touch your skin.
Yeah, exactly. Brocade reach a level of sophistication which is still not compared.
Just to ask real quick, what were the working class wearing during the 1400s, 1600s? Were they wearing similar things?
Also, since there's this form of stability in the socio-economical climate, so even the working class, like we say, is wearing very good garments. Like they're wearing cottons, very finely worn cotton, very finely worn silk. So they're wearing all those garments. But since all these records are generally made of the royal family, they miss out these important information as to what the working class was wearing. But there's a very interesting mention in Babarnama. Babur was the one who established the Mughal Empire in India, where he sees that there's a sense of prosperity even after the stability which comes with the rule, the working class is enjoying luxuries.
So the economy, even for the working class during that time, was quite prolific, as in they were also thriving, perhaps not as much as the upper class, but still enough to buy nice things.
So that is the time of prosperity. So everyone is getting a chance to enjoy whatever was on there in the marketplace to be bought and to be worn. But there are not too many examples of what the working class was wearing. It's my perception, and it's also, so anyone who wants to blame, do not blame me. Please blame Baburnama because they have recorded it wrong, probably. But there are not too many surviving examples of garments from that era because it's been quite tumultuous because there were constant wars and garment was not the main priority to be saved.
Yeah, and I guess too, even just because people had luxuries doesn't mean that they still weren't going through personal or political hardship as well. I think we sometimes confuse it because there was still, like you said, war going on and everything. So it wasn't like some dream world or something.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was not because these invaders who later formed the Mughal Empire also brought in their religious ideas, which were implicated on the general populace, which were quite hard.
So what's going on then in the 1700s? What are we starting to see change with the fashion?
Oh, 1700s is like Baroque and Rococo in France, in Europe. And that is the same thing which is happening in India. It's the time of luxury and excess.
That's interesting that it follows the same kind of excessive luxury as the Rococo era.
It becomes excessive till the 1800s. Like I have a fragment from a lehenga in 1800s, and that time they've only used gold, no alloy. Also to remember that 1700s was a time when India was contributing 30% GDP in the world's economy. From 30% GDP till the 1947, it was reduced to 3%.
Wow.
1700 is the golden age, the golden period of excess. You have garments being worn, everyone enjoying their life to the fullest. And you see in these slides, you can figure out the way all these people who are depicted are shown wearing these very richly embroidered, embellished garments. There is the major difference between what the Mughal ladies were wearing and what other part of India was wearing. So the southern part, we still have the sari, which is being worn there. If you come to the western part of India, you have a skirt and a choli and a veil, which is worn. The men are wearing the angrakha, which you liked the most, the pink and the white patterned angrakha. So men are wearing this is called an angrakha, which can range from anywhere like 6 meters to the circumference at the bottom can be 50 meters as well. This is a lady with these lotus-shaped eyes. That is the epitome of Indian beauty at that time. This is called Bani Thani. Bani Thani means all decorated and made up. The princess. It is from the Kishangarh School of Art. Since this was made in 1700, this is showing the complete transparent, so translucent odni, the veil, a very short blouse, which...
Okay, so it's a very crop top.
Very crop top. They used to be measured in this. So this is the length of the complete bodice.
Wow.
This measurement is called a balish, starting from here, ending here. The one sort of a bodice was one balish, that's it. But this measurement was going around 12 to 13 centimeters. It's being said that Madeleine Vionnet discovered bias cutting. But I think bias cutting has been existing in India since the 1500s. Because all these skirts, which is the circumference of which is 4,366 inches, was all panels were joined to form this big, huge skirt with a circumference was around 1,100 meters or something like that. Wow. Skirt. And they were very finely pleated and they were twisted like Mario Fortuny used to do. These skirts were twisted and kept stored. So they maintained those pleats of theirs. That is the reason you see these skirts having this bell shape. In these slides, I've shown you different variations as to what the Mughals were wearing. The first picture shows a prince wearing a blue horse, a mythical blue horse, wearing a black angrakha. And the ladies, these are all Rajput ladies wearing skirts and when I was talking about the different way of the western part, what was western part of India, and since my specialization on the costume and textiles of Rajasthan, I can speak a lot about that. So this painting depicts the various garments which the ladies in the western part, especially the Rajput ladies in the western part, were wearing. So skirt and a veil, a bodice. That's it. Then we come to a Mughal princess in the second. She is also riding a blue horse, and she is wearing something which was called a peshwaz. A peshwaz is like an angrakha, but it's longer. It touches the floor rather. You wear a pair of pajamas underneath, and you take your head veil. And at the same time, there's a third picture which shows a princely woman wearing a heavy lehenga, the one which I just described to you, a lady wearing a sari, and a lady wearing a pajama, a bodice, and a dupatta. Fashion depends on everyone's whims and fancies. Since we do not have any photographs or photographs from that era, it was very difficult to affirm if there was one particular costume which was worn all throughout India, or there were variations. But yes, we do know of two variations, one being the Rajput style of dressing and one being the Mughal style of dressing. And the only difference is in the women's costume, the men are more or less dressed in the similar fashion. Also, in terms of embroidery and embellishment, this was a time of great refinement. This picture shows a peshwaz which is being worn by a woman. Then the angrakha which was worn by Tipu Sultan, which ended up into a private collection in England. This is again beautiful cotton. An envoy from India was sent to the court of Louis XIV, and there was a lot of cross-cultural exchange. Mm-hmm. And these ideas of Indians being primitive, and Indians being and the Westerners being on a pedestal, had not yet made its way. So any visitors, any traders who were coming to India were being sort of assimilated within the cultures. So we were all on the equal footing in that era, in 1700s. But there was a lot of development in the area of costume and embroidery. Like, this was a time when we see the richest embroideries coming. We see the formation of Zardozi. Then we see this particular example of very fine crewel work, which later forms the basis of Indian embroidery. So very interestingly, crewel work is called Ari work in India. And that is the basic stitch. So you can do anything with anything in the authentic way. Like Zardozi is done by the thread and needle, but Zardozi can also be done with an Ari work.
So, of course, in the 1800s, there's already going to be quite a lot of changes now, especially, I'm guessing. So what's sort of going on by the 1800s?
By the end of the 1700s, the news of American Revolution and the French Revolution had come to India. There were a lot of modernization which were introduced by the Mughals, who were the supreme rulers in India at that time. India was a group of princely states. Mm-hmm. So they were constantly warring with each other, expanding their territories and all of that. So the Mughals, the supreme rulers, they started making a lot of modernization to the ways. So new laws of adoptions were being made legal in India. Like in case a prince didn't have an heir, so they can adopt an heir from someone else's family or some else state and all of that. So all of these modernizations are happening. And also drainage system was improved in the 1700s. In the 1700s, the caste system becomes very rich. I was not there to experience it myself, but what has been written, I'm just recalling that. There was general peace and content amongst the various communities which were existing in that time. Of course, there were turmoils. Of course, there were wars. Of course, there were war of successions which were going on within these different states. But generally, the life expectancy was also increasing in that era. So 1700s closes with a very rosy sort of a picture of India. Now in the 1700s was also the time when these different traders, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French, the English, have made their strongholds in places like Madras, Surat, Calcutta, and they were sort of in the process of expanding, but they were scared enough to not ruffle the wrong feathers of the Mughal rulers. Yeah, and everyone was very scared of getting usurped, and also the traders were behaving themselves. Traders which later changed the destiny of India, to be very honest. So this time, in the very beginning of the 1800s, we see Since the British have entered, the East India Company has come into India, they want to document the Indian way of life and different. This is the first time when we have actual documentation taking place of the flora, the fauna, the people, what they were wearing, what they were eating, everything happening in these albums, which were later sent to England. So in this slide, you see how a lady was dressed. A Nach girl was being dressed, a courtesan for that matter, and how a Nach girl from a different part of India was being dressed. So you can see the clear distinction. You can figure out that one is wearing silk and one is wearing cotton, embroidered, non-embroidered. Then you have various pictures of these people at work, and you see even a common man or a trader for that matter dressed in a cotton angrakha, a richly embellished cotton angrakha, a scholar, a Brahmin dressed in pure whites and wearing a headgear to match. Then you have a painting of a marketplace which was painted by probably a European painter. And you can see part of Chinese vases or containers, and an Indian lady of western part of India, particularly Rajasthan. So you see a lot of documentation happening, a lot of characterization which is coming up in India. Before the Indian 1857, Indians and the Europeans were mixing quite freely. They were playing the dirty politics. They were usurping kingdoms. They were acting as mercenaries. These traders were acting as mercenaries. They were sort of looting. They started their pillaging and looting as well. But it was also the time when they started having these BBs. BBs were Indian wives. All these European merchants and merchants, army men, they used to keep their Indian families. So there are a lot of records and paintings of the Indian families of European people. Those were called BBs. And with that documentation, you also see that the Europeans are also understanding Indian culture. They're learning Sanskrit. They are being given grants of land. They're giving title and then becoming assimilated within the Indian fabric. But it reaches a boiling point in 1857, where the British try to play dirty politics to such a level that it was a time when they started making new rules for the Indian rulers. They said that you cannot adopt anyone and everything. And this is how, and they started playing with the religious sentiments of people by handing them out cartridges which were coated with animal fat, with something which is forbidden, like cow fat for Hindus and pig fat for Muslims is completely forbidden. So that triggered a chain reaction which culminated into the war, the first war of independence in India, 1857, the Indian Mutiny, as it's very popularly called in England. And after the Indian Mutiny was suppressed, that was a time when the British Crown takes over India as a colony. And the rift between the Indians and the Britishers deepens. So yes, the rift deepened, but since we're talking about costumes, the costumes remain sort of constant. But now, since the trouble was brewing, they started reducing in that richness, you see.
Okay.
So now when we're talking about 1100 meters of circumference of a skirt, that skirt was reduced to 100 meters. If a man is wearing an angrakha which the circumference is like 50 meters, that angrakha becomes more tubular in shape. And also after the war, when the British Crown takes over, idea of morality is introduced. Typical 19th century British style of living, where everyone has to be covered and all of that. And sort of these British influences start creeping in. The ceremonial garments, I've shown you a jacket, 2 examples of navy blue jacket in velvet. So you see it becomes more like a coat. So you see a clear distinction between what was the preferred form of very loose-fitting angrakha with a very extensive headgear. So now you come to this, which is completely like anglicized version of Indian. So since the Crown takes over, 1850s, we see a sort of anglicization going on. So anyone who wanted to be in the favor in the good books, because the British came the supreme power in India, they had to amend their ways and wear proper clothing, because there was clear distinction. If a gentleman used to enter someone's home, used to take off the shoes. You always had a headgear on. It was not taken off like a hat, like what the British were wearing at that time. So there were these complete opposites amalgamated and formed something which was known as a person wearing a dhoti with a top hat and a coat, a very comic way, but it was mainly to do with the British policy of morality. So that was the beginning of the downfall for India. So British started exerting their control and power over the various rulers, which was strewn all over, and these rulers were called the princes. So all these princes, they started extending the power over these princes. They started governing it. This was a time when the Indian wealth is being sent to the crown. And this was also the time when they forced all the Indian princes to send their kids to an anglicized institution of studying to make them more worldly wise, at the same time ignoring the working class. The class disparity growing stronger and stronger every day. The poverty line becoming stronger and stronger every day. And also the caste system becomes more profound.
You mentioned that the 1920s, there was a lot of changes right around then.
1900s was the time when the British have full control over India naturally. But this was also a time when the governments sort of become unified. Like all these various regional governments were there limited to the serving class or for the people who were, of course, were prosperous, doing various jobs and everything like that. The reason I focused so much on the princes was because these princes provided the patronage for different dressmakers. In the 1900s, after being colonized, India was still the biggest consumer of luxury goods, like India is now. In case you look at the accounts of any of these leading houses, couture houses in Paris, perfumers, furniture makers and everything like that, you have on the top of it, it's in the Indian Maharajas. I've shared pictures of various Maharanis and princesses of India, and they're dressed in a very cosmopolitan style of sari. So all these regional ways of tying saris unify to become this navy drape, which is your head covered and the palla being taken from the left side and your head being covered. This becomes one unified, all these regional styles give way to this unified version of wearing a sari. The menfolk started adopting the uniforms of the British cavalries, and their traditional garments become more anglicized. Instead of the rich achkans and all of those, they started wearing uniforms mostly. No matter how anglicized these people got, the rich or the rulers or the princes got at that time, they adhered to their tradition. So when they came back to India, to their respective states, they used to wear their dress in the traditional way of the angrakha. Probably angrakha, that very voluminous angrakha becomes a part of history during the 1900s, and it becomes more tubular, more structured. And the angrakha and the coat, the western coat, unified to become sort of an achkan, which is like a tailored coat without any lapels and all, and just a cuff. And the ladies of the royal family stuck to the traditional garments within their states. Otherwise, they were only wearing saris. New fabrics started coming to India, like the crepe de chine came to India, French chiffon came to India, Georgettes came to India. Everything which was being woven in France was coming from India, and people were looking at more diaphanous fabric. They wanted to explore the luxury element of the West since they were being anglicized quite extensively. I've shared these pictures of an old actress, and she's wearing with bobbed hair. She's wearing bobbed hair and sleeveless blouses and armlets and sari being draped in a completely different fashion. Now, London doesn't become the center of culture. Paris becomes the center of culture in the 1920s in America. So there's a lot of cross exchange between America and India and France and India. So there's a lot of exchange from that. So new forms of beading, embellished sarees become a craze in India. Before that, there was less embellished sarees, and so you can very clearly see that fondness of Indian fabrics being taken over by these imported fabrics, which was another mean to destroy the Indian economy, because by the end of the 1940s, you see the Indian textile industry being reduced to shambles. Yeah, but now we're back and we're there to stay, because there's a different appreciation, which is there's a newfound pride which an average Indian like me is taking in their culture and the way we practice it, and the costume and the traditions of costumes and textiles in India. Of course, we do take our inspiration from those from the people who had a colonial mindset, but at the same time, we are very proud of our Indianness. You have to come and experience India, to be very honest, to be able to see how well the Indians have overcome that 3% GDP stage to now. And there's a lot of talent in India which is quite hidden, because I'm quite angry that all these organizations and all these NGOs in the West, they completely overlook the talented youth and the talented people in India. There are so many people who are so talented. Seeing firsthand, if you talk about graphic designers, you talk about embroiderers, you talk about historians, you talk about people like you and me. Like a little help and a little contribution would make such a difference into anyone's life, for that matter. Yeah. So I think West has to step down from that pedestal where they've held themselves and must open their eyes and see what's happening in India. I hope this was informative for the viewers, and it was such a joy. And in case you have any questions, do let me know.
Thank you so much. It was such a wonderful pleasure to have you on this episode, and I learned so much. I'm so glad I went into it without doing any research, because I feel like I've learned so much important information just throughout this, just throughout this process of listening to you and all the wonderful education you have to share with everybody.
Thank you for choosing me and giving me this opportunity. This really means a lot.